Hello, everybody. Welcome to IndieAdvocates.com and IndieVolt and the Rising Tide Publications On-Conn series of panels. It's the online comic book connections. This is what we're doing to make up for the fact that none of you guys and gals and any non-binary people out there aren't going to cons. We're bringing cons to you. We're giving you all the information you need to know. We're streaming live right now, again, in our Facebook group that honestly exists only for this predicament. Once this is over, we'll just shutter it. So we're going to have a panel for you guys today. We have 3 amazing panelists, including myself. I actually think I'm amazing sometimes. And today's one of those days because I made this nifty, cool graphic. So I'm excited to introduce our panelists. It's me, the Indie Advocate, where I don't have to be on camera, but you get a beautiful picture of me just pointing to all the people right next to me. How cool is that? So I introduce Luke Stone and Chuck's younger brother, Chuck Jr., without the beard and the hair. So
I still got the beard.
Okay. Well, no, you have a goatee now. You don't really have the beard anymore. Oh. The beard's gone. Like he looks like he's like 15 now, 16. Days younger.
That's what I'm aiming for.
So, Luke Stone, tell them who you are, how they can follow you.
I'm Luke Stone. I'm the creator. I do all the pictures and words for a book called Hybrids, the Sons of Gods. You can find me at www.lukestonestudios.com. You can also find me on the Facebook, Luke Stone Studios, and Twitter at Luke Stone Studio, all that kind of stuff. You Google me, I'll be there, I'm sure.
Chucky, tell them who you are.
Keep safe search on, though.
I will, but before I start, I want you to know that Luke Stone sucks and that you should really check out his Kickstarter for Hybrid Son of Man that's on right now. And if he was better, he would be telling you about it. Bam.
All right.
Anyways.
Pick him out. That's it. He was on the show. Just me and Chuck now.
Well, there it happens. I see. Look, I got moved down the. All the way down here. Because my camera angle looks like I'm longingly looking at Chuck like it's a.
Oh yeah. Jax was like, yeah.
I'm Chuck Pino. You can find me on Twitter at Chucky Pin. You can find my Chuck's Raw reviews here on Indie Advocates and on several other websites, as well as YouTube is my main hub. You can find me on Facebook, Chuck Pineau. It's Pino, and yeah, man, I'm just a writer, editor, making it happen.
Making it happen, Captain.
Speaking of what making things happen, how do we make a story pace right? Today's topic asked for us last week by actually a couple people were curious about story pacing. So how do we pace a story? What do we got to do to get our story paced correctly? How do we go about that? And I'm going to let Chuck start us off because he's an editor. So he's not only looking at stories on his own because he's also a writer, but he's checking other people's pacing. So walk us through it.
So often when I'm going to go through somebody's book, so when I do my own scripts, when I'm writing my own stuff, at the very top of every page, it'll be page 1 and the number of panels. And it'll go through. So now I can go through your entire script and just see how many panels are on each page. And a lot of times if I feel like there's a lot of repetitiveness or a lot of the same stuff, I'll go through the whole thing and then I'll send that person a thing and just be like, look at this. And I can't tell you how many times I see a comic where it sounds like this: 4 panels, 4 panels, 5 panels, 6 panels, 4 panels, 5 panels, 5 panels. And it's just like the same thing over and over. There's no pacing to that. You're just putting stuff on a page. Every once in a while, we need a breath. And you know what's a nice breath? 2 or 3 panels on a page. Those more panels on a page are usually a little more action oriented or more things are happening. Every once in a while, we need that breath. Give us a splash page. Give us, 2 or 3 nice, big, beautiful images on a page to kind of move it forward and slow things down a little bit. So it's really about losing the repetitiveness visually and stimulating people. And, a lot of people feel like they can do that just with panel layouts, but that's simply not true. If it's the same number of panels, people's brains do pick up on it and it becomes monotonous to them.
I totally agree. Absolutely. One of the things I've learned about pacing in a comic is giving those pages that have, maybe it's a splash or a 2-page, or maybe it's just 2 or 3 panels that have a lot of action, not a lot of words. That really speeds up the pace, though, of their reading. So it doesn't take a lot to look at that, but it does take out the homework of it. I'm a big fan of the Swamp Thing books, and one of the things about that is sometimes when you sit down to read a Swamp Thing book, I mean, you're gonna be at that for a minute, because there's so much dialogue, there's so much text on the page. Stan Lee used to do this, where he would put some kind of narration in every panel that Jack Kirby would draw, and that doesn't have to be, allow the pictures to tell the story, allow that to happen on its own. And sometimes you need some of those kind of editorial things, but I like kind of this piece of advice. If something needs to happen for the story, make sure that it's interesting when you do it. If you got to do it in an interesting way. That's kind of my thing. That's what I think about when I do that. But the other thing in pacing, it's people don't think about their page numbers and their page layouts. They don't think about the physical book in someone's hands. What's it going to be like when they get down to the bottom of page 1? Are they going to want to turn to page 2? Now, page 2 doesn't have to have that, because page 3 is right on the next page. It takes nothing to move your eyes from one to the next. But the bottom of page 3 has to have something to grab you into page 4. Has to be that way. And it's one of the things that's often missed with pacing a comic book. You'll have a story, you'll have a good idea, but we'll either use some generic page layouts, or we won't think about that. In fact, I was writing a short story that's going to be going out with this available in this Kickstarter that Chuck mentioned. Thank you. But Chuck is my editor, and so I wrote this 8-page book, and I'm like, man, I'm feeling pretty good about it. I've got the vision that I'm trying to push through, but I'd been looking at a lot of old Jack Kirby stuff, and he would always open with many times, not always, but many times he would open with a splash page, then you turn it and be a 2-page spread. And I kind of got that trope going on in my head when I wrote that script. And Chuck's like, maybe break this up a little bit. And, when I went back and read it, I'm like, yeah, you're absolutely right. So I think another part of being able to pace your book well is have somebody else look at it, because I would have at still at this point, I would have I'd be drawing it, and I would probably be done with page 4 or 5 by now, be thinking, man, this is awesome. I open with a splash. It's a really cool splash, really neat pictures. Wow, look at this 2-page spread. It's amazing. And then people read it, I'm like, what the heck is going on? I have no idea what's happening.
And we're joined by Varian, and then I'll chime in because I have some interesting insight to this. I've never heard anyone say it, but it is how I write everything. But Varian, introduce yourself, and we're talking about pacing your books.
Oh yeah, pacing your books is extremely important. I'm sorry, I'm doing my Edwin Boyette voice. Extremely important. Extremely important.
Yeah, dude, you sound sexy right now. You got the low sexy voice going on.
Yeah. No, I've got some books that were paced pretty bad. I've done a lot of books that were paced badly, but yeah, I do agree with what I overheard, that yeah, pacing is it helps if you get a good editor. 'Cause, I know I got a book that is paced. One of my first books is paced all over the place. Like, the pacing is really rough, and I got better at it because started self-editing, and then I had artists that kind of served as editors, like, hey, Van, this doesn't make any sense, and can I drop this whole page? And it worked out better, much better.
Yeah, I've gotten lucky a few times in the past, and Chuck knows, he's read my books, the recent ones anyway. And it's like not knowing what you're doing when you kind of go out right away. You can look at other people's books, but if you don't have somebody kind of looking at that and helping you, it takes a lot of thought, and you don't realize how much thought goes into actually laying out the thumbnails and the whole sequential art part of a book. I would get a lot of people, and even with working with Starcross, we get a lot of people that present their stuff, and they want to have it looked at, and they want to get a publisher or an imprint group like what we are. Mm-hmm. And they ask for, one of the things they do is they just show us a bunch of pinups and covers and stuff like that. And it's like, well, that's all well and good, but we need to know how you can tell a story. And then sometimes we'll get those black and white pages with no letters or anything on it. And it's like, first off, I know it's going to be a good book if I can see how it's paced, and I know what's going on without any text. But most of the time you don't, so you kind of need to see kind of that finished product to know like what the pacing is. And most of the time when I talk to somebody about pacing, they have no idea what I'm talking about. Zero idea.
Now, for me, when I come from pacing, I'm probably coming from a very different way than any of you guys. And that just has to do with, I used to do stand-up comedy, not for a long time, but I wound up studying stand-up comedians. And if you think about it, a joke, especially not the short jokes, not your really 2-sentence, 3-sentence jokes, but a real joke, especially some of the ones that go throughout the whole set, are actually pacing. If you ever notice, real comedians start the very beginning of their set with a joke and they end it on that same joke. And throughout that, they're keeping a narrative. It's about peaks and valleys. So when I'm writing, I'm always thinking about how I can keep my reader invested. I never really think about panels, but I think that's because I'm also thinking about the story's curvature. So I think I just naturally pick the right panels in the right places because, like Chuck said, you have to hit your points. Sometimes you have to get big and splash page and wow, look at this, because that's the moment of the joke where it gets loud and it gets intense. And I think that it's also, I've heard this one, which is similar to the comedy one, it's like writing music. You have to have it flow right. It has to give you that rhythm. And it's about pacing. What most people don't get is they have their stories move too quickly because they're trying to cut down on costs. So they make the story bounce so very fast from part A to part B that they're forgetting to fill in the little blanks. And Stan Lee did a great job of filling in those blanks with just as simple as having that box, that little narrative box. Like even having someone be a narrator of the story can help. So I look at it a little different. Chuck, you were going to chime in. What were you going to say?
So I was going to go back to the thing that Luke said about Kirby. And the funny thing where that's concerned, I actually I was reviewing. I've started reviewing for another channel, and they want me reviewing some of the bigger books. So I was reviewing what the hell is his name? Jonathan Hickman's newest book, Decorum. And as an editor, and as a fan, I read it and I wasn't in love. As much as I like his writing and I think he's really smart, my problem with that issue was that if you're not a fan of Jonathan Hickman's work, you'll never finish that book, that first issue. And it's because there's absolutely no speech for the first 5 pages. None of it seems to make sense. And then even by the time you get halfway through it, it's like, okay, I think I know what's going on, but I'm not totally sure. And I don't know who my hero is. I don't know who any of my characters are. And the thing is like, for most of us, you need the who, what, where, why, when. Like you need all of that right away. Mm-hmm. That's the part of any big scene. Especially like when I was doing comedy as well, it's the same thing. We want that in the first minute. If you don't have that, even less. And if you don't have that in the first 30 seconds, people are going to be lost. That stuff needs to be there. And he didn't give us that. And so for me, it's like some of these people can get away with stuff that we can't. And so it's like, when you do something like you do the, you open with the splash and then go into the double page spread. It's like, okay, that's cool, but you might not be ready. Like your fans might not be ready for that yet because that we haven't kind of earned that. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so I don't think that I would do, what Jonathan had done or even that what Kirby did necessarily, because I need to get my people right away. I need them to know the story. I need them to know what's going on. I need them to really feel what's up. And so I think that's all a part of the pace.
I would also challenge that maybe just a little bit, kind of being just the opposite side of that in just a little, in this sense that I open up so many first-time comic writers' books, and it's like an editorial dump. They introduce characters, and they're like, my name is such and such. well, my name is such and such, and I will do this because this is my power. And they like kind of dump all of like the plot of the story out, and they don't roll any of that. They don't pace any of it out to us. Now, sometimes editorial dumps are needed. You know, I had to use one in issue 4 of my last of this book series that I'm doing. I didn't want to do it that way. You know, I tried to work out different ways to move this, but I'm like, it's going to take me 4 more issues to just bring out this bit of information. This is probably the most interesting way that I can do it. So let's just dump it out here, right here towards the end of this, and then we'll get into the next issue. And sometimes you've got to do that. You've got to do those editorial dumps. But if you've got to do something, find an interesting way to do it. You know, kind of piece of advice. But there's too many people that they take 2 pages or 3 pages to put together the team, and it's a team comic book. I'm like, how am I going to care about these characters? How am I going to get to know about each one of these characters? What's the point?
Yeah, that should be a whole issue. I agree.
And so it can be very difficult. And I kind of like the idea of rolling out some books I've read that they roll out. This issue is just all about this character, and this one's all about, and you kind of like get these little pieces of the story that's going on behind, because they've paced it in such a way to where I find one character that I care about, and that character, through that character's eyes, it brings me into another character's kind of orbit. And then I am able to see something about that character that I'm interested in. And then they start to unfold that a little bit and unpack that for me. And then it's like a domino effect as the sphere of influence from one character to the next begins to grow. I start to care more about each one of these relationships because they've taken the time to develop that for me. And it's all about that pacing and getting it right. You can go too fast with that, and you can certainly go too slow with that.
Now, Varian, you're a publisher, so I want to hear from your point of view. Story pacing, is that something you notice is a big deal with your creators? Are they sometimes rushing the story out? Because I know some people, and I always equate creating comics always to dating. You're always trying to date a person and have a relationship with them. And if you rush it, you're going to get rejected, and you go too slow, you're going to be friend zoned. And we don't want to be friend zoned. We want to be in a relationship. So how do you do that with being a publisher? How do you tell someone that they aren't hitting the nails? They aren't hitting the tempos.
I'll give you the perfect example. From time to time, an ex-girlfriend of mine fancies herself a writer, and she wants to do a comic book. So she sends me these scripts. She wants my help, and these scripts they're bad. There's no two ways. And I'm not saying this because she's my ex-girlfriend. These scripts are bad, and she knows it. But the script, it's all over the place. From introduction of the characters, everything's going way too fast. And I told her, you need to sit down and learn pacing. The problem with that, guys, is that she went to screenwriter class, and she was taught to let the actors handle the pacing, let the director handle the pacing, let the editor handle the pacing. You don't worry about it, you just write. And when you're writing comic books, that's not necessarily the rule, in my opinion. You have to take that into account. So for instance, she has this scene where there's a farmer in the field. He's doing some farm work, and it's nighttime. And for some reason, this giant robotic jet, a picture of Quinjet, rises up over a hill and flies over his head, knocks his hat off, because the wind, the gust, and he looks at it going off in the distance. The next scene, I kid you guys not, she says, the president of the United States is at a podium, and he says, "Citizens of the world, we have been attacked again." And I'm like, by what and by whom? There's it. The pacing is all off. I don't know who got. Where was the attack? Where was any of that stuff? So she, I guess that's an example of she paced it too slowly, and then she went way too fast. And I try to tell, I try to tell people, you have to be. I have no problem as a publisher telling people, hey, I think you're pacing this a little too fast or a little too slow. Could you pick up here? And hopefully you can do that before the art phase has started. Hopefully.
Now let me ask you, Luke. You're a letterer. How does lettering play into that? Do you notice mistakes? Because I notice that a lot while I'm lettering something. I notice sometimes, and even with my own work, I'll suddenly find a mistake that it gets overlooked a little bit just because of the panel placement. Sometimes the way it falls at
Yeah.
the wrong moment. Do you?
Well, I want to say something real quick, Luke. I'm sorry. There are
Okay.
so many mistakes in Rob's work. It's hard to pick out just one. Go ahead.
I would like to refer you to Chuck. You can speak with Chuck about these issues.
So yeah, I lettering, especially when I started doing lettering, not just for my own book, but for other people's books. When I started doing that as more of a profession, you know, I start to notice the mistakes in the pacing of the page, how the panels are laid out, the amount of space that, you know, people will draw this little tiny panel, like a little 2-inch panel, and then they'll expect 3 paragraphs of dialogue between 2 characters to fit in there. And so they're trying to fit too much in, and they're expecting, you know, just kind of too much with that. And then I also kind of noticed the flow of how it reads on the page, and the lettering has a lot to do with pacing. You know, sometimes people will take a big bubble and they'll put 3 or 4 sentences in that bubble when they should move that there and move one down here and one over there, you know, and allow that as dialogue would come out, because we don't read it as I almost want to pull up a script and and give an example, but I'm not going to do that. But you know, it's like they have like 4 or 5 different sentences, but as I'm talking with you, there's a cadence and a rhythm to the way I talk. And I'm like, hey, can we discuss a problem? Something you said back there really upset me. You know, I don't say, hey, you know, I'm not like squeezing all those words together. I'm pacing that, and there's a rhythm to it, and you need to be able to do that also in the lettering and in the dialogue. So your letterer is gonna play as big a part. Hey, there's Chuck. It's gonna play as big a part in the whole process as your writer is and as your artist is, and so to kind of overlook those things. I mean, at the end, the funny books are really about telling stories. That's what they're there for. And we're trying to tell a story in a different kind of medium. And in the old days, the writers didn't trust their artists, so they would editorialize what was happening. They would describe in the panel in words what the panel was already showing. We don't need to do that now. If you trust your artist, you don't have to do that little trick. But you do have to be able to pace that story out well and make it understandable.
Now I want to switch to Chuck, and Chuck's not only been someone who's edited a lot of my work and will understand this reference. One of my main characters named Bruce barely has any screen time. He is a main character that is barely touched upon. And I'm bringing Chuck into this because Chuck has had that experience where he's had a main character that gets followed but is not explained, building suspense towards that character with Welcome to the Void. We get to visit him throughout a story, but we don't really get to see a lot about him. We don't learn a lot about him, but he does just enough to build interest in a character while other things are going on, which he then followed up with a perfect side story in The Advocator, which showed a different side of it, completing this yin and yang of character development. How important is character development? Because Luke even touched upon this, how people try to rush resumes out there and give you everyone at once without doing it in a clever way. Is that an issue you see a lot with people just trying to rush a person onto a screen and over-explain it?
Yeah, absolutely. The thing is that too often we're excited by our story, but what you get is that, like, what a lot of people don't understand is that there is no story without the characters. Like, find me a story, a really good one with no characters. It's almost impossible. And that's because the characters are our guides through it. They're important. We have to love those people. And so if you just fast pace through them and then go, okay, cool, well, this is the story, this is my twist. Well, the twist and all that stuff, it doesn't matter because we don't care about the characters. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to push them down people's throats or show them in every page, but it does mean that we have to kind of understand them and feel them. And sometimes not knowing them even adds to that. So it's about really getting the feel of your character and how much they do or do not need to be seen.
And that's fair. And at this point, I think that we've touched on a lot of it. I want to open it up to everyone again so we can have a nice, even flow conversation. I'm going to throw this out to begin with it. The biggest problem I see with pacing, and this is probably going to be controversial, but fuck it, I am always controversial, so it is what it is. I think people rely on art too much now. I think back in Stan Lee's day, art wasn't leaned on so heavily, and I think too many indie artists lean way too heavy on their actual artists instead of matching it. Both should complement each other. Both should go seamlessly together. And from what I read, this is my personal opinion, I think 50% of indie creators are leaning too heavily on artists instead of story. And I think half of the ones that are trying to put out a good story don't bother paying for an editor, and it shows. So I honestly will put it out there. I think only 25% of the product coming out right now is well written, well drawn, well put together, and well paced. What do you guys think about that? What are the opinions? Go for it.
Well, my
As
artist
the writer,
and
I'm going to let other people go first.
my artist and my writer, they don't get along. So
Keep your
they're
personal
constantly battling one another. No, I get what you're saying, and I see that. I think anyone that's trying to tell a story should first off get an editor. If not an editor, they should have at least a few people they can trust to tell them the truth, whether they like it or not. Because you need to know when you can't take it personal. I'm going to use Chuck as an example. Is that all right, Chuck? For our recent, this recent script that we've worked on, because we just finished up a script today. I sent him the first draft of the script, and he comes back with a whole list of things that needed to be fixed. I'm like, okay, I'll take care of it.
Luke,
yeah,
I'm not going to be rude. We'll get right back to this. Varian's got to jump out.
Oh, that's fine.
I want to hear this. Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead, Luke.
Oh, so he gave me a whole list of things that need to be fixed, and I said, okay, I'm on it. I didn't fight about it. I didn't argue about it. I didn't take it personal because it's not personal. We're trying to create the best possible story. He understood that what I was trying to tell is a story about mental illness, and he got that, and he helped me tell it. And so I think that these 7-8 pages of a mini comic coming out, I'm happy about it because I think that the point I'm trying to make is coming through. But too many times you'll have people, they want to tell a story, and then when you're like, hey, I don't follow it, I don't get it, they get all upset and all hurt about it because they take it so personal. And you know what? This is from a personal place, but I know that I'm not creating it's not just a project for me, it's a product. And I want someone else to be able to understand my thoughts and my feelings about this subject matter. If I can't convey that or communicate that properly, then they're not going to get it, and it's only going to be for me. It's going to be a vanity thing. I want somebody else to be impacted by it. And so you have to work with other people to do that. You have to be able to get that communicated. So you have to have an editor. You have to have somebody you can trust to help you communicate that story. And then you have to have a trust with your artist to be able to do that. You can't just say, hey, I've got this POS script that I've written, this piece of junk, and I'm just going to write something so that I can have someone draw it. I've got this really good artist on the hook, and he says he'll do it. He's giving me a great rate, so I'm just going to write a script real quick and throw it at him, and then we're going to get that done, and then I'm going to have the story. No, you've got to have a good script first. You've got to have a good solid story. Then you've got to have an artist that understands that vision as well.
All right, Varian, tell them where they can follow you so you can get out of here. I know you said you had I like the display.
That's nice.
Yeah, if you ever see that gaudy display at a con, that's where you can find me. We're never having cons again, are we?
No, you're going to have to find them online. So tell them where they can find you online.
Last Call Comics is where you can find me. It's the name of my publishing company that I share with Lola, who I was going to use as my backdrop, but because everything is better when a girl with boobs is telling you it's better. But
it would sound weird with the voice, though.
It would. People were like, what the hell are you?
No, I'd be down for it.
Well, Chuck, we'll talk about that fetish in a minute.
Yeah, but Last Call Comics, Indie Volt as well, INDIEVOLT. You can even find me on Indie Volt Radio if you have Google or your phone. On Google Play Store, iOS, or Streamer, you can find the Indie Volt Radio app, as well as Indie Volt TV on Roku, where since we're all quarantined, might as well take in some of those lovely indie movies that I got up there. They're all free to watch, done by a lot of really talented indie directors who may be directing your independent cop movie one day. Who knows? So check that out. And I think what you're doing here, Rob, is really cool. You're even giving people who might be thinking about getting into the comics right now, even in a master class, as it were, into how to properly put those books out. Because I'm telling you, I got a hold of a couple this week that, oh man, I would have liked to bring before a tribunal. Um, some of these people need to walk through the town with what's standing behind them yelling shame.
Shame.
Yeah, shame.
Well, Varian, remember, it's not just me doing this. You are part of this, of course, with your support that you've shown us with the Indie Vault. That's why we have this cool, new, beautiful picture here that shows Indie Vault there, and we're proud to team with you. And you've been on many of these shows, making them awesome. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it, guys. And thanks, and everyone, please stay safe, stay healthy, and don't order anything from like Uber Eats or anything. Jeez, just spread it to that point. They're actually probably gonna stop the service today. So
brought to you by Uber Eats.
Yeah.
Oh, and now a word from our sponsor.
Yeah. Uber Eats.
We are bringing you your food with coronavirus.
But yeah, like don't order anything from Uber Eats. And
Luke. He's gonna choke to death. It ain't gonna be Corona that takes that joke.
I was gonna say I don't order anything from Uber Eats and not from our sponsor Grubhub, but
yeah. Holy crap! I wasn't expecting that one.
Yeah.
That one got me.
We got.
Thank you for being with us, man.
No problem. You guys have a good day.
All right, I do want to.
buddy.
I do want to mention, since we're in the midway of the show, because I never like starting the shows this way. This is brought to you by the Indie Advocates Network. And as I said earlier, Rising Tide Publications has joined with Indie Vault and has joined with IndieAdvocates.com. And by association, for those who don't know, because for some reason people don't know this, and I don't know why, Chuck is a big influence on Indie Advocates. And he has his own channel, Chuck's Raw Reviews. If I thought it would make sense to put Chuck's Raw Reviews in there, I would have, but he doesn't really have a logo for it as of yet. But if you come up with a logo, I'll put it up there.
I do have a logo. I use it every time I put up a video. If you watch my videos,
can we review his logo?
That's a logo? No, I'm being serious.
I just have a little. I mean, nothing special. I'm not paying for a logo. It just says Chuck's Raw Reviews in weird little letters. Like,
okay, give it to me. If you have it as an actual logo, like when I mean logo, do you have it as its own thing? I've never been able to find it on its own.
It's honestly, it's on the site. Whenever I load up my videos, I take it straight from the site. I don't even know how I go on there.
I might have put it up there at one point. Then I'll look for it. I might have found a place, because I was going to talk to you about it if you wanted me to put Chuck's Raw Reviews. Because if you notice, I actually do have a space I left at the bottom for it. Yeah,
by all means, I'd love that.
Yeah, because and remember, guys, we're building this as we're going. This has been unprecedented that we've. I think I'm saying the wrong tense of that word.
Unprecedented.
There we go. Thank you. That we've had to put this all together up in about a week and a half now. And we keep just adding to it. We're like building a house without a framework, without a blueprint. This has never happened before. So if you guys have suggestions, please tell us. But we're working towards goals here. But enough about us. Let's get back to this important topic about pacing now that I think I broke Luke's thing.
I think you broke me, man. I was taking a drink of Mountain Dew, and you said that, and I was like, oh, my gosh. I'm going to start packaging all of my stuff and write on there coronavirus free.
You have to, man. Here's the cure. Give him hands.
Pardon me. Wow.
So pacing is super important. The art. What about that, Chuck? You're an editor. Am I right? Are writers leaning too much on art, not enough on story?
So here's the thing that I've noticed. Here's a big influence I've noticed. If you talk to most of the indies right now and you say, dude, what were you reading back in the day? What's your biggest influence? 9 times out of 10, they're going to be like, oh, man, 90s Image Comics was the shit.
Oh, God.
Was it? No, seriously, was it?
No.
Look, I'm not trying to be a jerk. The fact is, they made beautiful books, but most of those books did not stand up, and they didn't continue. And it's not just because the creators weren't willing to put the time into them. It's because the story wasn't there. They were not strong. And the thing is that you basically had these books run by artists who weren't necessarily trained writers. And the problem is, I don't mean any offense to artists. The thing is that you guys do stuff that the rest of us can't. But I can't tell you how often people will tell me, oh man, I don't need a writer. I can write. Anyone can write. And I'm like, no, you need to put down your pencil and walk away. Because it's blasphemous. The fact of the matter is so many of us who take writing seriously, we have focused as hard as on our craft as you did on drawing. And that means that we get the nuances, we get the subtleties, we get these things that you don't necessarily get. So if you just want to make a crappy popcorn comic that someone's just going to pick up and go, oh, this is fun, fine, that okay, that's no problem. But if you want to like take it seriously, writing is a craft. It's not just something you do. And I feel like it was not taken seriously enough. And so it's funny that I've been able to very easily discern the people who take it seriously and the people who don't. And I can't tell you how often I'm editing for someone and they're like, dude, I never even saw it like that. And I'm like, yeah, I don't mean to be rude. It's because you didn't take it seriously as a craft, you know? And so when they get to see these things, they go, oh, okay, cool. And they start to understand all these other pieces and all that kind of stuff that comes together and matters.
Well, you know, truthfully, I never saw myself as a writer. I actually saw myself as an artist, comic book artist. And then when I always wanted to write. And so when I wrote the first issue, the first time I ever wrote a book was the first issue of Hybrids. I had no idea what I was doing. But over the course of that, I've tried to market myself more as a writer because I've really tried to study the craft of writing a story and crafting a story. And so like now I'm like, hey, I'm a writer that draws instead of a artist that writes. You know, that's kind of what I've been trying to push myself towards.
And you can see that development, like through Hybrids, through Serafina. Like you can see the change. Like obviously your art is still getting better, but your writing has come a long way.
Now, Chuck, one thing I'll ask you to do is stop picking on Marcel and Evolutionine comics. I know that's who you're talking about when you're bringing up the stories that are just popcorn stories that are cheap. And I agree with you. But we're going through something right now. Let's not pick a dead horse.
My gosh,
I'm going to be straight with you. I wish he was the only problem. I really do. But sadly, he is not.
No, he's not. But kidding,
no, it's an epidemic.
I want an answer, though. You guys have both skirted the question, so I'm going to ask it directly. Do you think that we're in an era? And I agree with what he had said because it does admit, because Image Comics was a great idea without editorial oversight. And editorial oversight was what made Marvel Comics great when Stan Lee was there, and DC had its moments with its better editors in places. But do you think that we're leaning too much on art? That includes covers.
Yes.
So do you think that that's now becoming an issue where covers have become more important than interior stories? I
am so sick of the I was watching the Kickstarter pause today with you guys. So I was watching that while I was doing some work. And no offense to the guy, but he's got eight covers, 8 different covers for one book.
You have to be more clear because there are several people who do that now.
There's the one with the steak.
Oh, steak. David Byrne. Okay, yeah. Every woman has made a cover that's famous in comics.
The art looks the covers look great. I get what he's trying to do, but 8 covers, like the moment he said collect all 8 covers, I'm like, excuse me.
On the same thing, I have to say, I have not made $8,000 on Kickstarter, so I'm here with a notepad taking notes.
But
someone making that hustle, making that.
Yeah, when I go to the comic shop, man, I'm not picking up variants. I don't care about those other variant covers. I want whatever cover the editor decided was the best one, or the writer decided was the best one to go on that original production release, and then let's go from there. I have a special set of covers for my book, but it's by an artist that I really, really admire. And he's done the covers. And he didn't start out as covers. He did me some pen. He just said, hey, I've got this picture of your character that I drew. And I'm like, dude, I want to use that for a cover. And so I decided to just use his covers for a whole variant set. But, so I can get doing things like that. But, man, some of these things, they just go crazy. And if people are really deciding what they're going to read based on the cover. I know, you can't tell a book by its cover, right? But people do pick what's on the inside of a book by its cover. But in the same respect, you've got these covers that are beautifully painted pictures, and then you go on the inside and it's Cartoon Network.
I do think there's a difference though. You can't say that with comics in person. How many times have you guys seen someone at your table flip through a book and fall in love with it, or put it down because it wasn't for them? So I do think in comics there's a flip through. Have you ever sold books without a flip through?
No.
I have, and it's usually the alt cover. It is an alt cover that can sell someone, and they'll buy it just for that cover. So I don't think it's as simple as just blaming the alt cover. I do think there's a problem with art, and I want to hear from Chuck about this because
it's funny because the editor's about to disagree with you guys. I don't care about the alt covers. The fact of the matter is, we are not the audience. So if the audience wants some alt covers, go ahead. I don't care about that. But if your main focus is the alt covers, yeah, you have an issue. I think the main cover and an issue that I'm seeing in covers a lot is that it's this big beautiful picture, and I'll say to people, hey, you can judge a book by the cover, and people do cover. Yes, the cover does have to be great. However, so does everything inside, because the thing is that what you're talking about there is a bait and switch. If you have an amazing cover but the inside sucks, all you've done is screwed somebody out of buying one book from you. But will they buy two? Like, will they buy the second issue, the third issue, the fourth issue? No. So that story has to be there.
Yeah.
So what I will say is that your main cover should sell the story. I should have a good idea of what is going to be in that book by that main cover. It should tell me something. And if it doesn't, then maybe you need to, because I can't tell you how often it's just like, and people are going to feel attacked, but it's just like a beautiful pinup of one person. You're like, what does that even mean? Like, it's beautiful. It's a nice pinup or a nice
Why are you
print.
coming at me like that, Chuck?
I know, right? but how does that sell me on the book? I like to be able to look at it and look, my first book, it's the same way. And sometimes that's just what it is, but it should, okay, so Welcome to the Void. This is the cover. All right. So it's just one character, and that doesn't tell you anything. It's a beautiful image, and people like it, and they'll gravitate to it, but it doesn't tell you anything. However, with Belial, my main cover was this little imp with all these pictures, and it sold the attitude of the book. It sold the idea of the book. And so it's kind of like looking at the stuff going, okay, so, how can I sort of tell this story in one image? Not that has anything to do with pacing.
That can be really hard to do. Yeah, it's yeah.
It can, but again, the one singular image is not necessarily going to do it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
And I also want to bring up, and we are drawing to the end of our program, but I do want to cover this before we get to there. And this is probably going to be a little bit of a harder one with pacing, so I wanted to give it at least 10 minutes. I think that, honestly, there's a disconnect between the ability for someone to tell a story in the amount of pages that they're doing, and I see a lot of this, and I think Chuck will agree with me. People are trying to condense stories down into 20 pages to save money, and I think it's hurting actual comic book creators because they're trying to make it as short as they can without really explaining the story, and I think that's problematic. And you guys not only notice that, but do you have suggestions on how someone can avoid those pitfalls of worrying more about page count versus story?
Yeah, that's a good thing. I've actually literally been dealing with that recently with myself and with some other people. We get so tied in to page count because we want to print this kind of book because of the cost, or because I can only afford this many pages, or they give themselves an unrealistic deadline and they want it released by this date and they don't have the time to produce those other pages. And so most of the time, I'm not saying every time, but most of the time, the thing that suffers the most is the story and the understandability of the story and the readability of the story. And the story must take dominance. And this is coming from someone who is an artist. Like I self-identify as an artist. whether you identify me that way or not, that's how I identify myself as an artist, that the story must take precedence. If it doesn't, then it's a picture book. It's an art book. So whatever you got to do to tell that story, don't lock yourself into page count, but tell that story the way that it feels right for you. Get it to your editor. If they say you need more pages, add more pages. If they say that you need fewer pages, then cut it down. Let somebody that can help you take that idea and turn it into something realistic, be able to help guide you and lead you through that. You can't do it on your own. All of the greats use an editor. All the editors that I know that write books use editors. It's stupid not to have that help.
I do want to point out here, and I have to say it, we have to realize we're in an industry where you have to land the story sometimes and what an editor tells you to do. And I think that, and I'll pass this on to Chuck, so I think this is a perfect segue to him. I think the thing is that people don't realize how to tell a story with the page count they have, knowing how to hide in things for a later thing. And I think that's the cleverness of being able to not say it all at once and slowly build to it, has been lost by modern writers for a great deal of the indie market, because they've never worked with Marvel. I think it's a reverse problem, that as creators, we don't have that page count. I always hit my page count. I know beginning what I have to land on, and I never deviate from that. I always know I have 32 pages, or this one I have 20 pages. I always start with that in mind. And Chuck's seen my bigger scripts, and I've told him, don't worry, I'm cutting it down. And I do. And then I use the cut down, and I reference it for future in case I have a sequel. But I do want to pass this on to Chuck, because I've worked with Chuck, and I know he's got a great deal of insight on this from all that he's done.
Outlines. Like, seriously, outline. I have to scream this at people. Outlines. Okay? They're like, oh, I have a script. I'm like, okay, well, can I see your outline? What outline? Fuck, go away. The thing is that you just want to, like, you're like a little kid who just wants to, I want to make a comic. And you're like, okay, cool. Well, what are you going to do? Don't worry, I'll write a script. No, I don't want to see your script. I don't give a crap about your script. Show me your outline. So they'll show me what they want to do in issue 1. And I'm like, okay, but what is this? Is it a one-shot? Because it doesn't feel like a one-shot. Oh, no, it's going to be like a 5-issue mini. Okay, I want to see the outline for the whole series. Well, I don't have that. Cool, make it. Well, but you're not editing all that. I get that, and I'm okay with that. But the thing is that you can't just make one and not think about 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so, when you're pacing a book, you're not just pacing that book, you're pacing a series too. Cool. So you have to consider it that way as well.
You have to have an end game.
Exactly. So what is your end game? How are we going to get there? So from my clients, I want the outline of your arc, and I want your outline for issue 1. And those outlines help you they're guidelines. They tell you what needs to happen and what main points we have to hit. And so if someone has this long ass stupid outline that goes on forever, and they're like, that's issue 1, my 24-page book, and it's like, no, that won't land. You've got too much happening there. So then we can just cut stuff out there, move it on to issues 2, 3, and whatnot, and build up the whole arc. And then we can go, okay, now you know what you need to hit in issue 1. You've got a lot of space to work with. Go have fun.
Well, Chuck, let me ask you this. I hate to interrupt, but so you're talking about the outline, and so I'm new at writing, obviously, and so there's probably other people listening right now that are new at writing, and you say outline, but can you give them some mechanics on so you said a long 24-page outline for like this long outline for a 24-page book. How many points or how many things should they try to plan on putting in an arc and in a single individual issue? Like, how would you kind of lead them in writing an outline for the first time?
So, I mean, if you have a hard time with that sort of thing, I might just say, why don't you, you're new, it's a new thing. Why don't you try the 3-act part where you have act 1, act 2, act 3, and have that in your, so what are our main 3 pillars of this story that lead us from the beginning to the end of issue 1? And so if you understand the basics of the 3-act portion and you get that out, you're like, oh, okay, cool. You see those mechanics, you understand. Now, sometimes, someone might do it and they go, man, I only have 18 pages and I wanted this to be 24 pages. I'm like, okay, cool. So why don't we look over it? What are we missing? Maybe we could use some more character interaction. Maybe there's something else. So there's some spots where we can beef it up. Or maybe, you end up at like 30 pages and it's like, okay, well, if you really are dead set on that 24 pages, maybe there's some stuff we can chop out. Maybe there's some stuff that's extraneous or that can be brought into one of the next issues.
That's great advice.
Thank you.
That's great advice. Actually, I had, and so my story I'm telling now has actually got 3 acts, but it's over a course of 15 books. And so what I just finished is Act 1, next is Act 2, and then Act 3. And so, but then that laid down, it's like, okay, now over these 4 or 5 books, this is the 3 parts of that story. And then inside of the book, each book has 3 parts of a story to kind of lead you into the next part. So
I guess I'm the odd duck. I don't do an outline. What was that? I said, I guess I'm the odd duck. I don't have an outline. But I'm also
you usually don't.
I don't, but I always know where I'm taking the story. As Chuck learned, I know what I'm putting in, and it's because I don't ever have a closed door on my storytelling. I don't want to write an end till I write an end. I do have story arcs. I do know what my story arcs are going to be. Like with Barbara Unleashed, I knew where we were going to go before we switched off onto the next series. So my story outlines are different than Chuck's. I suggest them, but I've been doing writing for so long, I can imagine the story in my own mind, and I guess that's where my outline is, if that makes sense.
It does, but I'll be honest, it doesn't hurt to have that outline.
No,
I mean, honestly, it's good practice. You know what I mean?
I definitely started by writing outlines. I just don't do them anymore. I got into the habit of knowing.
I have outlines for all my stuff.
Yeah.
If you came to me right now and you said, so where's Belial going? I could show you the outline, and even remember, it's a guideline. So I originally had the outline for Belial. It was going to be 5 issues. And then as it moved forward, I was like, actually, I don't need 5 issues to tell this story. I could make issue 4 a little bit longer and have like a cool giant size issue, end issue, but not have to have 2 full issues. And so, it's like, you're feeling it out, you're getting the idea of it and whatnot. So it's not necessarily written in stone, but at least you're able to look at it, and even you can go back to it and go, does this work? Like now that I see it all developing, is there somewhere I can play with and something I can do to kind of tighten this up a little bit?
Yeah, no, I know production cost. I was going to say that I know production cost plays a big part in, us choosing our page counts. I'm a little bit different than both of you guys in the sense where I can draw most of my own stuff. I can color it. I can letter it. I can take on most of the responsibility myself of doing that production. So let me ask you guys this question. When you are working on a book, do you ever take page count and the number of, not necessarily page count for printing, but how much it's going to cost to produce that book into account on whether or not you want to spread that out over 5 books versus 4? Because obviously you could tell it in 5 books if they're all 20-page books. That's 100 pages, but you could reduce the page count if you make 4 24-page books, And so, do you ever kind of have to do the math and stuff like that when you're writing these outlines or writing these scripts?
Do you want to go first, Chuck?
Okay. I haven't had to yet. Not too worried where that's concerned for the most part. I would like to stick to the 24-page issues because that's sort of the standard, so to speak. So I try to kind of stick to that, though. I think actually Belial ended up being 32 pages, so I'm always willing to play with it. With Belial, we were willing to take more chances. With Welcome to the Void, it was more about I wanted it to be a little more closer to standard. So I think it's more about the feel. It just has to have its own feel, and so you just have that in your mind and you just go, okay, well, if this is what I want to do, I need to understand that this is what my budget's going to be.
Well, first off, for me, the one thing I should mention is that when I was talking about not writing an outline, that's when I write for myself. I have been brought onto other projects, and when I'm on another project, I always give an outline because they care about page counts. Because they will tell me what the page counts are, and now you have to follow along that method, and you have to prove you understand what you're doing, and you also have to show that outline to an artist that you're teamed with sometimes too. Sometimes I'll have to write an outline not for myself, but for the actual artist involved in the story. But to answer your question, and Chuck knows this, I don't care about page counts in my own books. I write until I'm done and find the perfect point to break. And if I don't think if I need 2 extra pages, I'll put in 2 extra pages and find filler. If I need 4 other pages, don't care. I am always going to put storytelling ahead of everything else.
See, now, I agree with that. I think that's the way it should be. But I mean, I see so many people that they're just cranking stuff out. And it almost, to a point, kind of makes it, and not necessarily for everyone, but I've read books that felt kind of heartless and soulless because they were so slavish to the dollar on what it was going to be to make that happen. But
I didn't know you were reading Marvel books.
Well, I picked up one this weekend, so
I'm peer pressured into it.
that was the mouse with the
board.
Back to work. Let's do some more easier stuff. More art, less letters. We don't have to. We're paying by the letter now. We're not paying by the page.
Oh, I wish.
You know, I had a letterer tell me that he couldn't letter because there are too many words in it, and I was like, "Can we fire him?" Like, this guy deserves to be fired.
Yeah, there's a challenge. Now, I did have to. I looked at it. I was working on a script, and I did tell him, it's like, you've got to cut this down by about 30% because there's no way that. I mean, he wrote a novel, like, and I'm like, this is not. I can't, even if I made the font an 8, I can't fit everything on this page. There's, without covering up some of this art, and they had like these strict guidelines not to cover up any of the characters or anything like that. I'm like, well, you are painting me in a corner here, so as a letter.
Blog. That's what you do. You make the story part blog, right, Chuck?
No. There's
a comic.
No, there's differences in making the story be. You can cut something down. Sometimes you can cut out words that you just don't need. Like
every word, Luke, every word.
No, not every word. But there's those times when you realize that maybe I don't need to go into detail. No one cares what the model of the missile is that's getting ready to hit this guy. All they care is that it's a missile. I'm like, why are we going into like the manufacturer and all that kind of stuff,
But Luke, what if they work for Boeing? What if my fan base is from Boeing?
Well, that goes to a point that we didn't talk about. And here's my main point before I even start a script or an outline for a book is I try to determine who is my audience and what am I trying to tell my audience? Because that changes everything. If my audience, I work with a lot of people that are actually faith-based or, Christian people that are trying to write books for other Christians. And I'm like, okay, well, you're going to write this book for a Christian and you're going to tell the gospel message. They've already heard that. They already know Jesus died for their sins. You don't need to tell them again. It's like if you're writing a Batman story, we get it. His parents died in an alley. We don't need to hear it again. Sometimes, that we'll keep rehearing the same story, be repeated and repeated. Okay, their parents is dead. Their parents are dead. This is what happened, and it's almost like the character is just know who your audience is, write to your audience, write to what they're interested in, figure out what it is you're trying to tell them, and then work with your editor to make that happen.
Now, unfortunately, hold on, we are out of time.
Uh-oh.
Because this is a panels and we're committed to a 1-hour panel, just like if we were at a con.
Well, it shows me that we got a minute and 20 seconds left.
You want to say goodbye, Luke? Okay, Luke is sacrificing his time to say goodbye, so you get
I'll sacrifice my time so Chuck can take it away.
Chuck, you get it all now. You get the last minute since that. So tell them about all the cool stuff you're up to.
I will, but real quick, that's the difference between all the Batman movies and the most recent Spider-Man, where Spider-Man was like, we're not going to talk about Uncle Ben. You already know about him. Anyways, I'm Chuck Pino. I'm a writer, editor. You can find me at Bonfire Press or Essence House or Belial Comic on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter at Chucky Pin. And, of course, you can find my Chuck's Raw reviews here on Indie Advocates or on YouTube.
Luke Stone. All right, Hybrid Sons of Gods. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter and YouTube. Just look up Luke Stone Studios. But I do want to send you today to the Hybrids of Sons of Gods 1 through 5 full arc. Right now, we are sitting a little over $300 on that Kickstarter, and if we get a few people to bring that up to $500, we're going to make sure everybody gets a copy of Seraphina #0 in digital format that Chuck just finished editing today. So we're really excited about that short story. So
We'll see you tomorrow at 4.
That's looking good, people.